I remember that when I got into self-improvement like a couple of years ago, I started learning about all these like good habits and things I needed to do to better my life. But then eventually when the time came to do these things and implement this advice, I would still choose to do the things that weren't good for me instead. I would, for example, go on my phone and scroll on social media while I would have this voice in the back of my mind telling me that I should do something better with my life. But for some reason, I would always find myself being unable to listen to this voice, and I would keep scrolling here in this case. It's like there was this invisible force inside of me that would just take control over my body and deciding the actions that I took in my life for me, leaving me powerless and unable to control my own life. This is also known as self-help depression, where you have the right knowledge and you know exactly what you should and shouldn't be doing, but for some reason, your actions just don't align with it. Luckily for me though, and also luckily for you, I was eventually able to fix this problem for myself and finally take back control over my own life again. So if this problem sounds familiar to you guys, worry no more, because in this video, I'm gonna tell you exactly what you need to do to fix this. First of all, in order to understand this problem we're facing here, let's dive a little bit deeper in the so-called invisible force I just mentioned, because this seems to be the thing that's preventing you from making the right decisions in your life. Now, this invisible force is what scientists call our lizard brain. And the lizard brain is one of the oldest parts of our brain that is solely focused on survival. Because of that, it means that it really likes things that give you dopamine. Because if we take a look back at the caveman times, whenever we would do something that was beneficial for our survival, like finding food or finding shelter, for example, that usually gave us a lot of dopamine. And therefore, we got motivated to do more of these activities. And then this means that it also doesn't like the opposite of this, which are things that are threatening to your survival. And this is most often discomfort in your life. So this can be things like physical discomfort, so when you're in a lot of pain, for example, but it can also be mental discomfort. So whenever you're experiencing any negative emotions, so to say. Because when we once again take a look back in the days, when we experience something like stress or fear, for example, a very negative emotion, it often meant that we were in actual danger at the time. When we felt a lot of stress, it was probably because we were running away from a predator or something like that. So that's why the lizard brain evolved into avoiding all these things that give you discomfort and guiding you towards pleasure and dopamine instead. So that means that nowadays, whenever you experience any negative emotion like fear or stress or boredom, for example, the lizard brain will immediately pick up on this and notice that something's wrong in your life, and it will immediately try its best to guide you towards something that gives you dopamine instead. And how it does that is by creating a sense of urgency in your life. If, for example, there is a girl that you like and you think about approaching that girl, but then after that you feel a little bit of fear inside of you because you're a little bit scared of being rejected, then the lizard brain will pick up on this fear and be like, no, don't do it. It's too risky. You shouldn't be approaching that girl. It's way too scary. And then it really amplifies your emotions, really amplifies this fear, and it creates such a strong sense of urgency, like you need to do something about this fear, you need to go towards dopamine instead, or else something bad will happen. It's like it will completely take over your mind in this case. There's nothing else you can think about anymore. And then what you're probably going to do, you're going to go towards dopamine, which is probably something like scrolling on your phone, for example, and then the lizard brain will calm down again. But when we take a step back and look at this phase where the lizard brain will get triggered and starts nagging at you to not do it, at this stage there might also be another voice inside of your head. A voice that is a little bit more calm and based and says something in the lines of, if you want a girlfriend, you need to take a risk. If not now, when will you? And this is a very interesting thing to notice, guys, because this is where another part of your brain comes into play. This is called the prefrontal cortex, or what I'm going to call it, the rational brain. This part of your brain is a more modern part, and it's responsible for long-term survival, which means that it will use these things like logical reasoning and problem solving, because these things will help you to survive in the long term. So when we compare this to like the lizard brain, that is also focused on survival, but it's mostly short-term survival. It's only focused on what's best for you right now. The rational brain is actually able to see the bigger picture and allow you to make decisions that are actually beneficial for you in the long term here. It's basically the part of your brain that allows you to think and reason as a human being compared to like plants and animals who just act on instinct. So whenever you hear this voice inside of your head telling you what's actually the right thing for you to do at that time, that's your rational brain speaking to you here. And that means that whenever you will come to a point in your life where you have to make a decision, you will notice that there will be a fight inside of your head between your rational brain that's fighting against the lizard brain here. And the winner of this fight ultimately decides what action you will take in your life. And as you've already noticed by now, the lizard brain is the one that wins this fight most often. Or else you wouldn't have clicked on this video. But there's a very simple reason for that, and that is that, just like I mentioned already, the lizard brain has the power to amplify your emotions and create a sense of urgency inside of you. So that means that whenever you experience any negative emotion in your head, the lizard brain will notice this and make the problem even bigger than it already was. And by doing that, it can completely take over your mind and override all of the logical reasoning of your rational brain all at once. It's like you're not able to think about anything else anymore because it will generate so much fear and anxiety inside of you, and it will try its best to guide you towards dopamine instead, which are most often the things like scrolling on your phone, for example, which are most often the decisions that are not good for you in the long term. So even if you have gained all this knowledge from like all the books that you've read and all the podcasts that you've listened to and all the YouTube videos like these ones about self-improvement which you watch, so therefore you increased and improved your rational brain, as long as the lizard brain is still able to take you over, then it will always do that. It will always bypass all of your rational thinking all at once, making it almost impossible to act on what you know is the best thing for you to do. So now the question is, how can you tackle this problem? How can you make sure that you're actually able to listen to your rational brain instead of always being controlled by the lizard brain? And the answer to this, guys, is that you need to focus on creating more mindfulness, which means that you are able to look at your inner state and be able to calmly observe it without immediately reacting to that. And the best way to create more mindfulness is, of course, with meditation. There are, of course, a lot of different forms of meditation out there, but today what we're going to focus on is just what's called mindfulness meditation, and it works as follows. The first step is that you just sit down or lie down and get into a comfortable position. Then what you do is you close your eyes and you take a couple of deep breaths in and out until you feel calm and centered and present. Then what you do is you start out by observing your thoughts. So you start to notice what thoughts arise inside of your head. Something that can help you here is by silently asking yourself the question, what will my next thought be? And then whenever a thought arises, you just observe that thought and you just look at it and you just don't judge it, so to say. You don't do anything with it, but you just allow it to pass. And then whenever another thought rises inside of you, you simply do the same thing again. And then eventually, when you do notice that you're getting a little bit off track, you're getting a little bit distracted, and you're noticing that, you're exploring your thoughts, you get caught up in the story of the thoughts, then what you do is you notice this happening and you bring your attention back to simply observing your thoughts again, and once again asking yourself, what will my next thought be? So unlike a regular meditation practice where the goal is often to stop thinking and use an anchor like your breath, for example, to return to whenever you get caught up in your thoughts, with mindfulness meditation, the goal is to still keep thinking, but simply not get distracted by your thoughts. This is a very good exercise to increase your mindfulness, because what you're basically teaching yourself here is not to indulge into your thoughts, but instead separate yourself from them. Whereas before, inside of your head, there would just be your thoughts and nothing else really. By creating mindfulness, there's now this extra aspect here, which is called the observer. And the observer is the part of you that is just noticing the thoughts as these things that are arising and just passing by, and it doesn't really judge them in any way. And because there's now a separation between like the observer and your thoughts, it means that in between there is now this space. And this space is very powerful, because in this space, you have the ability to pause and decide what you want to do with these thoughts. So instead of being controlled by your thoughts and letting your thoughts decide your actions for you, you are now able to not be controlled by them anymore and decide your own actions. And when you do this practice a lot of times and you start to increase your level of mindfulness, then what starts to happen is that throughout your life, during your day-to-day activities, you will have more of these moments where you will notice that a thought is arising inside of you, and you can just notice it and observe it and just let it pass and just let it go, just like in your meditation practice. If, for example, you're doing some daily activity like riding your bike to work, for example, and suddenly you notice that it starts raining and you get this thought inside of you where you're like, I don't like the rain, then what usually would have happened is that you would explore this thought further, and you might like start complaining about the weather and start nagging inside of you, like, oh, I don't like the rain and stuff like that. You start complaining a little bit. But then after you've done a lot of meditations and you've increased your mindfulness, so to say, then what can happen instead is that suddenly you're like, hey, now there's a thought and I'm noticing this thought, and now I can decide what I want to do with this thought. And, complaining is not really serving my life in any way. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to let this thought be, and I'm just going to leave it. And then I'm going to continue to go on with my day. And then what happens is that the rest of your day, you will be more calm and peaceful. So now when we bring back the problem of the lizard brain always taking control over you, whenever you experience any negative emotion in your life, we can now finally tackle this problem, guys. Because now, whenever the lizard brain is responding to any negative emotion by amplifying that emotion and making this fear or anxiety that you're feeling even bigger than it already was, you can now instead catch the lizard brain and notice that it arises inside of you and just observe it and say to yourself, hey, this is the lizard brain. Here's a thought, which means that you can catch it and you can decide what you want to do with it. And then you can, of course, decide to finally let go of it because you realize that it's not serving your life in any way. And then what happens is that when you let go of the lizard brain and its thought patterns, is that you don't allow it to grow bigger anymore, but instead let it disappear. And then a space opens up inside of you again. And in this space, there's finally room for your rational brain to come in and give you his take on the situation. You are now in full control of the situation, which means that you can finally tap into the wisdom that you've gained from reading all these books, watching all these YouTube videos, etc. You can finally make better decisions in your life. And this is exactly what will help you to get out of this so-called self-help depression, because now finally you're no longer controlled by this invisible force inside of you anymore. And instead, you're able to listen to the voice that knows what's best for you. You can finally live your life to the fullest, guys. So now that we arrive at the last part of the video, I just want to give you guys some quick practical tips which you can implement in your life so that after you finish watching this video, you know exactly what you need to do. Now, the first and most important tip that I want to give you guys is to start doing daily meditation. And I don't really care whether you do this for like 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes, as long as you make sure that it's becoming part of your daily routine if it isn't already. Because what you have to understand is just like when you go to the gym and you do all these exercises and you stay consistent with them to grow your muscles, meditation is also an exercise, just like going to the gym, but then for your mind instead. Just like the gym, you need to stay consistent with it before you start to see serious results here. It took me literally hundreds of days of consistent meditation before I started to notice that I was able to get more of a hold over my thoughts and the lizard brain here. And I'm still doing this every single day as we speak right now because I'm still trying to get better at this. And next up, what I want to give you here as well is some example meditations, which are specifically designed to create more mindfulness and awareness inside of you. Now, the first one is where you do this visualization exercise where you see your thoughts as these clouds that are passing by in the sky. So you imagine yourself just laying down on the surface and you look up at the sky, and those are your thoughts that are just passing by. And the reason why this is a very powerful exercise is because by turning your thoughts into these objects that are different from you and are not inside of you, you are more easily able to create this separation as the observer and the thoughts that are passing by. You can also, of course, use other visualization techniques here. So something like maybe you're looking at a TV screen, for example, and your thoughts are just on the TV screen and they are just passing by frame, as if you were watching a movie, for example. There are a lot of free guided meditations available on this app called Insight Timer, which I personally use every day. So feel free to experiment on there as well. I will make sure that I will put some links in the description below in order to help you get started with it. And then the last tip I want to give you guys here is to simply set the intention more often to be more mindful and notice your thoughts more often during the day. So whenever you wake up, for example, you can tell yourself, today I will be mindful and not let my thoughts control me. This is also a very powerful thing to do, because when you actively set an intention like this, what you will notice is that during the day, you will actually notice your thoughts arising more often. You can kind of compare this to like when you tell yourself, today I want to notice more yellow cars, and suddenly you start seeing a lot of yellow cars throughout the day, where usually they would already be there, but now you're able to actually notice them. It's like you're giving your brain an instruction here, and then it's just primed to follow it. And that brings us to the end of the video, where there's only one thing left to say, and that is to stop watching YouTube videos and start implementing the tips I just gave you, so you won't forget about this advice and actually change your life. Stop thinking, start doing. Take care.